The Institute for Conservation, Advocacy, Research, and Education was a nonprofit that I started in 2004, mainly spawned out of my concern for the health of the Napa River, and again, concerns that my children couldn't access the river, for one thing, because the banks were so steep. And then I was concerned about the water quality. And I grew up, as I said, on the Eel River and the Russian River, and I had no apprehension of entering the water, and it was such a huge part of my life. So this institute was, mission is to protect, conserve, and restore aquatic ecosystems, both surface water and groundwater, from San Francisco Bay to the Oregon border, including rigorous scientific monitoring of the health of the Napa River since 2000. What I learned as I did a lot of self-teaching, because there wasn't anywhere I could go in Napa to learn about the health of the Napa River, even though I tried so hard, even as a volunteer for 5 years, at the Resource Conservation District, it just was not satisfying. So one of the first things I learned was that Napa is a biological hotspot on the planet. So here is Napa right here. This is the United States right here. But these red areas that you see on this slide are biological hotspots around the planet, and they really, really need protection, because oftentimes they are diverse in species and abundance. So in the Napa River is evidenced of this amazing biodiversity, although it's highly impaired at this time, is that the Napa River has 34 native species of fish. And this is unlike any other river west of the Sierras. So it starts at the headwaters of St. Helena, it goes all the way down to San Pablo Bay, and there's this tidal influence all the way up to Hardman Lane. So you have one ecosystem in the tidal area, and then you have all these freshwater species. So 34 native species is both the tidal brackish water and the freshwater. So that's okay. And then we also have species of that have gone extinct, but ones that are hanging on are like Chinook salmon, steelhead, California freshwater shrimp, and those are some of the critical species that we work here so hard to protect. Now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it has this yearly report, and this year the alarm bells were ringing loud, and scientists are saying, that we are at 1.1 degrees Celsius, and catastrophic climate change occurs at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the big concern here is that 1.1 is increasing, and we haven't done what we're supposed to do to get off fossil fuels and go to renewable energy. We are degrading, chopping down, clear cutting our forests all over the planet. And this is the single best carbon sink on the planet, our forests and our wetlands. And we should be doing everything possible to protect them. We really shouldn't cut one more tree, not one more tree, in order to stave off this 1.5. And this is a huge discussion going on among the scientists all over the world, that we should be planting trees, not cutting them down. So everyone must use their voice in action to prevent the 1.5 degree rise in global temperature. Together, one for all, we can do this. Believe in the change that is you. So here in Napa, we do our own share of clear cutting, and it's for the expansion of the wine industry. All these examples here, Western Calistoga, Western Hills of Napa, Mount Veeder, and this is just a fraction of what's going on. But This is clear cutting. This is cutting down our native forests to plant wine grapes. And it's the most harmful land use in Napa. And it's the biggest expanding land use in Napa. Nothing else comes close to what's going on here. Next. This is Quartum Canyon, and this was done pre-1996. And some people will say, well, grapevines, you know, they sequester carbon, but no, not like a forest. Look at this green forest here. Look at what's going on here. And there's an added tragedy to this kind of development. When you take away the forest is a sponge, and it collects the rainwater in its needles and in its roots and all the soft ground around it. It's a perfect ecosystem for gathering the raindrops and sinking them into the soil and recharging the aquifers. And this perfect system that nature made, the water then drains down, slowly comes down through the mountains and ends up in the stream down here, right? It's a very slow hydrologic process of recharging the aquifers. And when this happens, the rain hits the ground, and the ground is nothing like this in here. And so the water runs off very quickly, and it gets into the stream here way too fast. And we'll see what happens when that happens. Next slide. This is what happens. This bank is like 20 feet high. This tree used to sit on the floodplain. And it used to sit upright on the floodplain, but because all that water was rushing down off those vineyards from all over the county, it enters into the river channel, and it becomes a tremendous erosional force. And it has caused, since the 1950s, for the river to do what we call incise. So that water comes rushing into the river, and it's too much. The river can't handle it, so it erodes the bank and it erodes the bed. And as you can see, this is evidence of a tree that over, decades has lost all the soil around it and now is just cantilevered over the river, losing its root strength, and it will eventually fall in. And I have kayaked the Napa River since 2000, and I've seen hundreds of these trees fall in from this very reason. So we're losing this incredible riparian canopy from this erosional force. Some people, because of that erosional force, they panic, because here's a house right here. The river's down cutting, the bank is falling in because the erosional forces are eroding away the river banks. So they just throw anything down there. They can't afford to build a big wall. They can't afford to hire the Army Corps of Engineers to fix it. So they go, well, let's just put sheet metal down there. Let's just throw more pipe down there. Let's put this barrel down here. And pretty soon you've got this mess. And this is this guy trying to save his property. His house is right there. So this is right almost near, this is the Napa River here. This is a 40-foot bank. All that soil went into the river, covered up spawning gravels, filling the bay up with sediment, filling the river up with sediment. And you might have heard that they're going to start dredging in downtown Napa. That's from mountain soil. That has come off the vineyards and has settled throughout the Napa River, filling the river up. In some places, it's only 3 feet deep. There's so much sediment in the river. So they have to get it out. And so it's a tragedy because we're losing our forests, we're losing our mountain soils. They're ending up in the river. This is all floodplain right here that's eroded away. It's gone into the river, settling downstream, and now the taxpayers pay to have it removed. But here's what a river's supposed to look like. We're supposed to be able just to walk out and get into the river. I call this a lost river because you can't see it anymore. The banks are so steep and so eroded. Can you imagine a child trying to climb down here to get to this water? They can't, it's too dangerous. But here, a child, a fisherman, can get to the river to fish, swim, and recreate. Water diversions are huge. We have over 2,600 groundwater wells that are pumping groundwater, and we have thousands of diversions on the surface. And this fellow right here has a vineyard over here, but wanted to get water over here, so just put a pipe across the river. It was totally illegal. Next. So while kayaking, this is what we have to go through. And you don't want to get in the water because this actually is a dangerous algae bloom. And this occurs a lot on the Napa River. These algae blooms can turn toxic and they can kill your animals, and they can kill you too if you decide to drink that water. Nobody would, but it could be an irritant to the skin if you were to get in there and swim. But there are areas of the river that it's clogged up like this. And this occurred in pre-summer, spring, when the flows were diminishing from all the pumping, surface and groundwater. So it destroys water quality, and pretty soon the algae takes over. Yes, thank you. So here's one of the sediment plugs in the Napa River right at the Trancas river crossing. This is a huge sediment plug. It's just sediment that's been moving down through the river over the decades. Here we have more algae and plant material. This is the Napa River right here at Meadowood, and this is Tuluke Creek. And again, low flows. And this is all this is all that we're doing to the river by taking out too much water. It's not just the Napa, this is happening all over the West. We're over diverting our rivers way beyond what the rivers can replenish with natural rainfall. And because of climate change, this whole situation is getting much, much worse. This was the Napa River in July last year, right at St. Helena. Just a few weeks earlier, we had water running through here. It wasn't enough to keep the fish in good condition, but within a couple of weeks it was dry. So 2 years in a row, the Napa River has been a dry river bed from the confluence all the way to the tidal portion. A lot of people don't realize this is going on because they drive around downtown, they see the river down there, but that's tidal influence. As soon as you get up into the freshwater, it's either the stagnant pools or dry riverbed. This was an unfortunate situation by the Clover Flat landfill. They had an illegal grading project and their soils were volcanic, and when the rain came, the volcanic sulfur in the soils, they had no erosion control, so it was an illegal grading. But when they should have had it covered up before the rainstorm, they should have done a lot of best management practice, but this is actually sulfuric acid in the river. And we got posted on the Napa River for about a month not to go in there. Just another example of egregious pollution to the Napa River. So since 2017, Napa, the county of Napa, has been surrounded by wildfires 2 seasons in a row by almost 2/3 of the Napa River watershed. And this was taken up on Atlas Peak, but these burn areas are severe. Not everything burned this way, but enough. And this is a tragic occurrence to our watersheds as well. So we know that we lost trees in here from the fires. So it makes no sense to keep cutting trees when we are having unusual fire occurring. And then on top of that, clear cutting, we need all these trees. And look at how this is surviving in here. Much of this is dying and fell. And, you know, we need those landscapes to come back, and they're landscapes of survival. So we have to do everything we can to protect our landscapes. Thank you. So, like I said, over 2,600 groundwater wells pumping water out of the Napa River aquifer, causing this dewatering. This should be a flowing river, and it's not. This is an isolated pond, and this is all the way into summer. This is it's a fairly large part of the channel of the Napa River, and all that's left is this pond. And right up at the top, we got this going on. Next. So, as I was saying, people do things to the bank of the Napa River to protect their property. And so this stone wall is probably 50 years old. But in October of 2021, this wall gave away. And now the river's cutting in behind here, and you can see sunlight at the top up here. So the river is actually going in towards the house and carving out the floodplain, and this whole wall is going to fall into the river. So iCare went to all the resource agencies and made presentations on this, because you can't see the river. You can't see that this wall has fallen. So this has the potential to reroute the river 100%. This whole thing could fall in. The river could either go this way or it could go that way. Over here is Silverado Trail, and over here is an estate. So one way or the other, the river's going to take that wall, and it's going to create a whole new channel somewhere. So we asked the county to get involved quickly to help the landowner, try to put emergency measures in and see if we can prevent a major shift in the Napa River channel. So another precious landscape in Napa County are these absolutely gorgeous vernal pool areas. This is the flower rings that occur once the water has starting to recede from a vernal pool. Volcanic vernal pools are only in just a handful of places on the planet. And because the county failed to protect this, it went into vineyard. I tried to stop it, but I wasn't fast enough. And you can't see this very well, but this was October 2000. And I put this slide in here because we talked to the neighbors. This is at below Kimball Dam, which is at the headwaters of the Napa River. And we went there to track the flow, and there was no flow, even right there, right below the reservoir, right at the beginning of the Napa River, there was no flow. And this was October 2021, and we talked to the neighbors, and they said that's the first time, in 2020 and 2021 was the first time since they've lived there that they've seen the river dewatered. Here's another site where taxpayers paid a lot of money for restoration, and you need to be really careful when you vote, because when you vote and you give this restoration money, sometimes it's wasted money. If you over divert and take all the water away, all this restoration doesn't matter because there's no water. So California was the last state west of the Mississippi to do groundwater legislation. And the only reason they did it was because there was massive land subsidence in the Central Valley, where the Central Valley dropped 30 feet and ruptured the canals and broke bridges, and it's a huge disaster. So it prompted the governor to do the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and there was finally will in the legislature to pass it in 2014. So now we have groundwater regulation. Napa County just finished their groundwater sustainability plan a few weeks ago, and it's at the Department of Water Resources to see if it'll get approved. I tracked it since 2014. I was part of the governor's panel on developing SGMA, and then I've been instrumental, iCare has been instrumental in the development of the groundwater sustainability plan in Napa. It falls short because it doesn't account for climate change. It's tragic. So we tried hard to get them to account for the metrics that we need for climate change, but it didn't happen. So now we're going to have to try to get California Department of Water Resources to get Napa to do it. And again, another stagnant pool. Go ahead. And this slide, because this is how fast the groundwater pumping can diminish the river. So the pumping can cause the river to fall significantly very quickly. And this is an example of that, because you can see how this wetted edge went down very quickly. It could be like this, but instead it's like this. This is above Rector, and there's a rare trout in here. It's absolutely gorgeous. And below Rector Reservoir, by law, they're supposed to release enough water to keep the fish in good condition, but they don't do it. And so now we have this instead of this. And so the Institute for Conservation Advocacy, Research and Education, we bring rigorous science to the problem. We've been collecting benthic macroinvertebrates since 2000. We've been doing snorkel surveys since 2000. We take that rigorous data and we put it into the state's database so that the scientists can use it and make arguments for restoration and protection of the Napa River. And this is one of our snorkeling projects since 2000. We document the health of the fish and the stream. And in 2021, we put together 2 scientific teams, and we collected benthic macroinvertebrates. We collected water samples and algae samples. And because of our rigorous work and more evidence that Napa is special, we discovered a new spring snail, a new caddisfly, a rare stonefly, and a blind crustacean. And last year we discovered a new algae. So the scientists are like, wow, what's going on in Napa? We're saying, yeah, we're trying to tell you we should do more about protecting this place. And that's our team that was out there. And I put this in here because Alex Howell is a direct descendant of the Wapo Native American tribe here in Napa. There are still 300 members of this tribe. And he joined our board this year. He was on our project in the spring. And he knows the river. He knows where all the Native Americans, where their villages were. And he just brings a lot to our nonprofit, and he works well with our volunteers. And this is Belle. And we worked in the burn areas. So, you know, there's burn area here, but the stream is green, and there we are out there collecting. But this is above diversions, so there's water in here. And accidentally, we collected a California freshwater shrimp. And this is an endangered species. It's about this big. It's very transparent. You can't see it. So it got in our nets. And as we were cleaning out for the bugs, we found this little guy. And he wasn't damaged, and we were able to put him back in. But you know, for years, when I talk to the resource agencies and I talk about California freshwater shrimp, and you shouldn't be doing this to that habitat, and this project should be mitigated for this animal, they say, well, they're not here anymore. I said, no, they're here. And this was more proof. So the Napa River, I call it a lost river. because of people can't fish, swim, and recreate, and deforestation, over extraction of surface and groundwater for vineyards is depriving the river of water recharge. Napa County continues to allow new groundwater wells for wineries and vineyards, which are in the main extractors of water, drying our streams and rivers. Excessive extraction of water is killing all aquatic life, including threatened and endangered species like Chinook, salmon, steelhead, California freshwater shrimp, western pond turtles. Municipal reservoirs that's the water you folks are drinking, okay? Municipal reservoirs are at high risk of not being able to provide potable water due to lack of freshwater flows, causing increased higher concentrations of contaminants like nitrates, enriching harmful and toxic algae bloom. This is a really, really big problem. Wells all over the county are going dry. Climate change exacerbates all of this. So we really have to have a voice and be active in what's going on in land use in our local communities. I mean, you should be watching for when you can have public comments or write letters to the editor. There's always something you can do to help change this trajectory. So I already spoke about the Groundwater Sustainability Management Act of 2014 and our plan that went in. And because the river has its size so much, we've lost these important groundwater dependent ecosystems all along the river. This is a spring high up in the watershed on Atlas Peak, but these are all really, really important little areas. It looks small. It's like, oh, it doesn't really, whatever. But this recharges aquifers, okay? So we have to protect those areas. And this is Mill Creek, which is in the state park. And both of the state parks during our project had flows like this. And that's because they're state parks. But I make this point because nature is still providing water, even though we're in this long drought since 2014. There is still water out there to keep nature alive. But we have given too much of the flows away by giving permits for more development. And the carrying capacity of these watersheds just can't take it anymore. So we have to figure out a way of backing out of this disaster and making sure we have fresh flowing streams, because that's how we keep healthy communities. And we have 9 disadvantaged communities in Napa, from American Canyon all the way up to Calistoga. And those disadvantaged communities, these are people who still fish from the river, find a way to get fish and eat from the river. And you know, we're harming those people who need that protein and need clean water from our reservoirs and can't afford to buy bottled water. So we have to look out for those disadvantaged communities. There's environmental injustice in all of this. The goal is we need to protect our wetlands. We need children to be able to play in the river. I and others want to kayak and enjoy the river. And someday I want to see coho come back in the river. This was taken in the 50s, and that's steelhead and that's coho. So the public doctrine since the Justinian times protects in perpetuity the human right to fish, swim, and recreate. What does a lost river mean? No more water, no access to the river, diminished surface and groundwater, no water for wildlife, plants and fish, no swimming, no fishing, no recreation. With climate change, a lost river means no clean flowing water for every living thing. A terrible loss to the public trust resources. What can you do? Go electric, protect natural landscapes, reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle, purchase local food. Buying food from Chile or Mexico out of season, those small things, those are things everybody can do. Purchase local, try to buy things out of a lot of plastic containers because that's petroleum project. Get politically involved, and these are just a few things you can do to try to be the change you want to see. Hear me while you can. Nature is critical to our survival. Its voice must be heard. Help the creator of all things. Listen to the sounds of nature. Help protect it for future generations.